We can speak of missiles and borders, but there's something darker going on. And in my experience, when you see, when there is evil, evil eventually manifests, and there is evil cutting through all the illusions of honour in the war in Ukraine. The theft and the weaponization of children is that manifestation of evil. Since 2014, and with industrial escalation following the 2022 invasion, Russia has abducted over 35,000 Ukrainian children. This is not an allegation, it's a matter of record recognised by the International Criminal Court, which issued arrest warrants for President Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova. At first, children were taken from orphanages in Crimea and Donbass. Then, in occupied territories, they were seized directly from parents, often at gunpoint. What followed was not care, but erasures. 95% were sent to re-education camps, where Ukrainian language, identity and memory were systematically stripped away. Children were told they were Russian. They were forced to sing the Russian anthem every morning and taught a distorted history in which Ukraine is merely a rebellious province. Kindergartens in occupied regions now teach folk culture and stage patriotic performances. This is cultural genocide, changing a people not through bombs but through books, nursery rhymes and uniforms. And the atrocity doesn't end with re-education. As these children grow older, a new horror unfolds: conscription. Thousands of these stolen children are now turning 18. Ukrainian officials have obtained draft documents, battlefield photos, testimonies confirming that Russia is forcing them to fight against their own homeland. Some are sent to cadet schools where they are trained with live ammunition. Others have been found dead on the front line. Boys who just years earlier played in Kherson or Mariupol now conscripted to kill their own countrymen. This is not mere military desperation, it's psychological warfare. Putin is conscripting the children of Ukraine to kill the fathers of Ukraine, and the campaign is not ad hoc, it's meticulously planned and operated by Russia's FSB with support from so-called children's agencies. Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab has identified 116 facilities across Russia and occupied Ukraine, some as far away as the Pacific coast. And this is something that Trump tried to close down. Children are held for months, sometimes years. They're isolated, radicalized, and militarized. Maria Lvova-Belova, Russia's Commissioner for Human Rights, is personally implicated. She adopted one of the abducted Ukrainian boys. This isn't care. It's trafficking. And it's the largest child abduction operation seen in Europe since the Nazi Germanification of Polish children during the Second World War. And President Zelensky has launched the Bring Kids Back, framing this issue as a red line in the peace negotiation. Ukraine has refused Russian officers to exchange abducted children for prisoners of war, rightly identifying it as hostage diplomacy. International support has grown, particularly in the US, where polling shows that this issue, alongside religious persecution, resonates deeply with the public. It's not merely about Ukraine's territorial integrity, it's about civilizational ethics. A regime that abducts, indoctrinates and militarizes children is not a state behaving badly, it's a rogue actor in a violation of every norm of war, of diplomacy and of humanity. But, this is not new. We can go back to the Ottoman Empire and the use of the Janissaries. The Janissaries were an elite infantry in the Ottoman Empire, founded in the late 14th century by the Sultan Murad I and abolished by Sultan Mahmud II in 1826. They were not merely soldiers, but the backbone of the Ottoman military power and imperial control. Yet behind the martial prestige lies a story of coerced child conscription, enforced psychological severance, and brutal militarization. They were called Yenicheri, which means new soldier. And they were a standing army, loyal only to the Sultan, distinct from the feudal levies or the tribal forces. They were shock troops in battle, palace guards in peace, and often political kingmakers. They were mainly recruited through the collection or the gathering, a state-sanctioned system of child levies, Christian boys aged 8 to 18, taken from the Balkans, especially Serbia, Albania and Greece, sometimes Anatolia. They were where agents of the Sultan would arrive in rural villages and forcibly take the children regardless of family protest. Wealthy or noble families were especially targeted, as were physically strong or intellectually promising boys. These boys were forcibly converted to Islam, forbidden from speaking their native languages. They were cut off from their families permanently, and contact with home was prohibited, apostasy punishable by death. This was psychological erasure by design, and the state sought to break family and ethnic bonds, forging instead an artificial, absolute loyalty to the Sultan. Once taken, the boys faced a brutal regime, starting with sorting. The most promising were taken to the palace as pages destined for elite civil and military roles. Others were sent to Anatolian farms to toughen them up before military training began. They endured severe discipline, severe beatings, forced marches, relentless drilling. Disobedience was punished ruthlessly. Though rarely discussed in detail, some were victims of abuse by commanders or palace officials. Originally, they were forbidden from marrying or owning property, but they were intended to be the Sultan's property, body and soul. And training emphasized fanaticism, detachment and death before dishonor. Many were taught to kill without hesitation, even among their own ranks if ordered. Janissaries led assaults, often against overwhelming odds. They were expected to fight to the death. And among the first military units in the world, they were the people first to use muskets and cannons systematically. Their marching songs, their rigid formations, struck terror into enemies. They were deployed in siege warfare, urban combat, suppressions of rebellion, and when they were too weak, new recruits replaced them. The system consumed its own, and old age meant disposal. By the 17th century, Janissaries had become politically powerful. The celibacy rule failed. They married, they settled, they became a hereditary class in Istanbul with political clout. They staged coups, murdered sultans, and resisted reforms. And when Mahmud II tried to modernize the army, the Janissaries revolted. He responded by massacring them with cannon fire in their own barracks. It's an event called the Auspicious Incident in 1826. The Janissaries embodied everything, the paradox of state power, terrifyingly efficient, yet built on coercion and deceit. This whole thing left deep scars in Balkan memory. Many see it as a kind of child slavery, a trauma masked by imperial glamour, and the Ottoman Empire's most loyal soldiers were originally its own Christian captives. The Janissaries were not an army, not just an army. They were a calculated engine of assimilation, indoctrination and state violence, and behind the parade ground discipline was a system that began with abduction, thrived in brutalization, and ended in blood. And I think Russia's war is not just against Ukraine's land, it's against its future, and it's using the techniques of the past. And no ceasefire or negotiation can be honoured until the children stolen by Putin are returned home. This is not merely a war crime, it's a theft of generation, a calculated act of cultural extermination dressed in the language of patriotism. And the fact that this has been going on from 2014, 10 years, 11 years it's been going on. And the children, some of the children have resisted, some have escaped, some are smuggled back by their mothers, some remember who they are. And that is Ukraine's hope, because no army, no dictator, no re-education camp can ultimately erase the truth whispered in a child's soul: I was not born to serve you, I was born free.